Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the Friday the 13th edition. Happy you are here with us. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Good luck on this Friday the 13th. Jimmy Akin, our guest, both hours. And you're welcome to call with whatever question you've got. 888-318-7884. Looking at the, oh man, I was going to say only one person on the line and then all the lines lit up. Okay, one line open right now. So go ahead and dial 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And he can fill up the phone lines in the first second of the show. Hi, Jimmy Akin.
Howdy, Cy Kellett. How you doing?
I am pretty darn well, I would say. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to put it. Pretty darn well.
How's the weather where you are?
You know, it's kind of the standard wintry weather here in Southern California, 65 degrees, down from the usual 70. But pretty good. We're not. I think you know this, but a lot of people don't know. We're nowhere near any fires, and a lot of times people see there's a fire in California and they think, well. Are you okay? But yes, Malibu is, I don't know how far Malibu is from here, 150 miles maybe, something like that. So everything's nice out here. How's the weather there?
Cold. It's, because we have actual seasons here in Arkansas. And so
big mistake.
It's gotten, oh no, I love them. It's got cold and the leaves are off the trees and, we haven't had snowfall yet, but it has been raining a little bit, and so that's good. And it's nice and brisk, I'd put it that way.
That's nice. And I guess it's a little early to know whether you have a chance at a white Christmas.
Considering that's 12 days away, yeah. Weather reports don't tend to be that accurate that far out.
No, I find even the 10-day ones aren't that accurate. Well, they're pretty accurate here in Southern California. It just says 65 degrees, partly cloudy for the rest of the year, and it'll probably be 65 degrees and partly cloudy for the rest of the year. But where there's weather, not so good. 888-318-7884. I honestly don't know why I'm giving out the number because everybody already called. Every single line full. But lines will open up, I am sure. Jimmy, of course, proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It's Friday, so that means there's a new episode. Today's episode is what, Jimmy?
Exorcism. I look at the history of exorcism a little bit. It's not mainly about the history, though. I mainly look at the two rites of exorcism that are used in the church. One of them was released in the year 1614, and the other was released in 1998. And so I go through the two rites, and we quote from them, and especially we look at the rules for when exorcisms can be performed. We also look some at the prayers that are used to give people just a general sense. We don't go through those in detail, but just to give people a general sense of what they involve, we do quote them a little bit. And I also note some of the implications of the rites and how they compare and contrast with some of the stuff you hear about exorcism, like or demonic possession more specifically. Like different exorcists have different theories about what causes people to get possessed and what causes exorcism to work to get the demon out. And so I note aspects of the actual rites that either support or don't support different theories that you hear.
Oh, I'm glad you're doing that because, man, is exorcism, it's all the rage on the internets these days. Lots of people have their exorcism show. So
well, and you hear a lot of crazy stuff, and that's one reason I wanted to lay a foundation by looking at the actual rites. I'll cover more in the future, but today we're starting with the rites.
All right, check it out, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts, or check out Jimmy's YouTube page. I don't know, is it called a page, Jimmy? I don't know, a YouTube channel? YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And find all his material there as well. All right. Let's take a quick call. We got Luke in Seoul, South Korea, and it's Saturday morning in Seoul, South Korea. Good morning, Luke. No, Luke? Good morning, Luke.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Luke. We couldn't hear you there for a minute. It's signal's having trouble getting across the Pacific. But happy Saturday morning.
Happy Saturday morning. Good to have you back. Hello, Jimmy. Good morning.
Howdy. What's your question today, Luke?
All right. So my question is, why do the church refer to the Pope as Holy Father? If in Revelation 15 verse 4 it says that only God is holy, and I think I've had a cardinal even address the Pope as Most Holy Father. So could you explain that, please? Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid I wasn't able to hear all of what you said, but I got the gist of it, I think. So it's true that in one sense only God is holy, but that doesn't stop other people from being holy too. In fact, Christians are regularly called holy ones in Scripture. Only in a lot of English translations, I'm not sure what you'd see in a translation into your native language or into Korean or whatever, but in English translations, the term Holy One or Holy Ones is frequently translated as saints. And so when you look at the fronts of St. Paul's epistles, for example, he'll address the saints in Thessalonica or the saints in Corinth or the saints in Rome. And he's referring to living Christians here on earth. And even though they're not yet perfectly holy the way they will be in heaven, they have been made holy by God in a substantial way that warrants the use of the term in their regard. So even though God is the ultimate source of holiness, and you can use language like only God is holy in one sense or from one perspective, that doesn't mean that others don't share in his holiness. And so since the Pope is a spiritual father, you can refer to him as a Holy Father.
Luke, we're just having a little trouble hearing you, so I'm going to leave it there and say I hope that was helpful to you. It's always nice to hear from you, Luke, on a Saturday morning there in Seoul, South Korea. Now you can go have your breakfast a little bit after 8 o'clock in the morning in Seoul. We got time to take another question before we have to. I thought we were taking another international call here. Myra is in Baghdad, but Baghdad, Kentucky. My bad, Myra. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. I have two, Jimmy, if you have time. Thank you both. Love it. This is like my life for 2 hours every afternoon. If I were to want to not wear socks and shoes during Mass, is that okay? And two, if you have time, if we have a prayer request and we lay it at the foot of the cross, can we walk away in peace, or is it best to be like St. Monica? Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to need you to repeat the the second question because I couldn't hear it all.
Oh, I'm so sorry. If we have a prayer request that we lay at the foot of the cross, can we walk away in peace and move on, or should we best be like St. Monica and just
persist,
stay on it till it's answered?
Okay, Myra.
Okay, so in regard to the first question, is it okay for us not to wear shoes and socks in church? Well, there's no mandate that says you must wear shoes and socks in church. And I can imagine cultures where they don't. Shoes and socks are not universal in all parts of the world. And so if you're in a part of the world where it's customary not to wear shoes and socks, but to have bare feet, then there wouldn't be anything unusual about going to church in bare feet. It's not written into liturgical law that you have to wear them. And so it would really reflect local custom in terms of what form of dress is appropriate at Mass. Here in the United States, now you're in Kentucky and I'm in Arkansas, and we don't always wear shoes. I grew up barefoot, and at the time, not all the time. I mean, when I'd go to school, I'd wear shoes and socks, but outside of school, I would often go barefoot. My feet toughened up as a result when I was a kid. These days, I wear my cowboy boots, and so my feet are a little bit more tender, since they're not constantly, in contact with the rough surface of the ground. But here in America, the custom tends to be to wear shoes in church. Now, sometimes you may not have socks, you may just be wearing sandals. But if you went completely barefoot to church, it could raise eyebrows. I wouldn't say that you have to, but it might cause people to wonder or be concerned or things like that. You might even get a request from someone, maybe the priest or someone else at the parish, to wear shoes if possible. Now, if you don't have shoes, then you don't have to. but it is customary here in the United States, and I generally find that it's advisable to go along with local custom just so that you don't become an object of attention, and so that you don't confuse people or raise concerns or cause people to think you're being disrespectful or things like that. Like, for example, I normally, when I'm out of the house, and even sometimes when I'm in the house, I wear a hat, but it is not customary, even though it's not against the law for a man to wear a hat at Mass. It would cause people to think I'm being irreverent by showing up if I kept my hat on during Mass. And so I take my hat off during Mass. And in the same way, if, someone shows up with no shoes, where it's the custom to have shoes, then it could make some people think that you're either very impoverished and don't have shoes, or that you're being disrespectful. And so my general counsel, unless it's a special circumstance, would be to wear shoes here in the United States. Now, your second question was, is it okay? You used some figurative language in expressing this, but if I understand the question correctly, is it okay to just say a prayer and leave it with God, or do you need to keep praying that prayer until it's granted? And here it's a judgment call. On the one hand, we have passages of Scripture that point in different directions. On the one hand, Jesus says, don't go stammering on in prayer, because God already knows what you need before you even ask. And he says that the pagans, think they will be heard because of lengthy prayers, but don't be like them. So that would be an argument for just saying the prayer and leaving it with God. On the other hand, we have other passages that say things like, we should always pray and never give up, implying that we should keep praying for something. And so I would say that it's a judgment call. There's no one right answer here. It's not wrong to say a prayer and leave it with God. It's also not wrong to periodically bring that prayer up, as long as you're not slipping into thinking that you're wearing down God to give you your prayer request, like pagans might think. I would say there's a healthy balance to be struck there, and figuring out what that healthy balance is likely to depend on the nature of the prayer you're making and what impact the prayer is having on your spiritual life. If you're becoming obsessive, you should probably back off and just be more trusting of God, because really we don't need to pray to God at all. He knows what we need. The prayer is for us. It's to help us grow in love of God and neighbor. And so if we see that by making this prayer, we're growing in love of God and neighbor, well, then it makes sense to keep praying. But we shouldn't be obsessive about it. And if we find that it's not leading us to grow in love of God and neighbor, well, then we ought to back off and just be more trusting of God.
Myra, thank you very much for the call. We got to take a quick break now. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with the gospel message. EWTN is the most trusted source of authentically Catholic content on the air today, featuring Mother Angelica, Dr. Marcus Peter, and Father Wade Menezes. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything both hours today. A lot of distractions in the studio today. Edgar decorated. Hey, we got our Advent decorations up, and Edgar just made it beautiful in here, and it's very distracting to me. But also, we got a homeschool group in. The problem with the homeschool groups is they look at you like they know stuff you don't know, and I think they do know a lot of stuff I don't know. But one of those homeschoolers here with us right now, Robert from the Our Lady of Mount Carmel Homeschool Group. Welcome, Robert. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Are you having a good time here?
Yes, I am. It's very interesting here.
And what year are you in school?
7th.
7th grade.
Yes.
All right, and you have a question for Mr. Akin.
Yes, I do.
All right. We don't have him on the video, but you can hear him, so you can go ahead and ask.
All right. Mr. Akin, am I right with that?
Yes.
What does the Catholic faith mean to you in like your own words, I guess?
Well, the Catholic faith is extremely important to me. It is the organizing principle of my life. I am a Christian first and foremost. That supersedes any other identities I have. I mean, I'm an American, but being a Christian is more important. I'm a Southerner, but being a Catholic Christian is more important. I'm a science fiction fan, but being a Catholic Christian is more important. So it's the organizing principle of my life. That's how I would say it concisely.
Okay.
That makes sense to you, Robert?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
it makes total sense.
All right. Well, let's give him a Jimmy Akin book. How about, you know what? I think you would enjoy, I'm just guessing, but I think you would enjoy the Bible as a Catholic book. That's one of Mr. Akin's books.
Yeah.
So we'll give that to you, Robert.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, thanks for coming in and asking your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Akin, for letting
No
me ask my
problem.
question.
All right.
Sure.
You can hang out here or you can go back, Robert, whatever you'd like to do. I'm going to go to the phones now. John is in Texas watching on YouTube. John, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Mr. Akin. My questions are, since you made the Mysterious World episode on Skinwalker Ranch, do you think you know what explains it now? And my second question is, do you believe we've ever been visited by a time travel or a creature or something from another universe? Thank you, sir.
Okay. So there's 3 questions there. First one, now I did make a Mysterious World on Skinwalker Ranch. It was episode 36. So anyone who wants to listen to that, and I did it before Skinwalker Ranch was famous. In fact, when I did that episode, my co-host Don Bettinelli had never even heard of Skinwalker Ranch, so it wasn't all over television the way it is now. For people who may not know, Skinwalker Ranch is a site in Utah. It used to be a working ranch, but a lot of really strange phenomena have been reported there. And there have been a couple of books written about it. And so and as well as a lot of articles, and now there are TV shows about it. I did episode 36 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on Skinwalker Ranch. And so if people want to listen to it and hear what I had to say, they can go to mysterious.fm/36 for episode 36. In that episode, I consider different options for what could explain the phenomena that are reported. And I consider natural explanations. I consider paranormal explanations. I'm dependent on the reports, that people have made. I mean, if it was all lies, well, I don't have a way of controlling for that. But if the reports are accurate, it's some pretty strange stuff that isn't easy to explain in normal terms. So I concluded I don't know what's responsible for the reported phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch. I'm open to different possibilities, but I don't have firm, settled opinions. And so with regard to your first question, John, since that episode came out 6 years ago, have I come to any more settled conclusions? And the answer is no. I don't have firm opinions about what could be going on at Skinwalker Ranch. I recognize there are a bunch of different possibilities, but I don't have firm opinions about which ones are correct. It's a mystery to me. In terms of your second question, do I think we've ever had a time traveler visit us? Well, time travel into the future happens. It happens to all of us normally at the rate of 1 second per second, and relying on relativistic physics, it's possible to travel into the future at a rate faster than 1 second per second. If you travel very fast or into a very dense gravitational field, then time is going to be different for you than for the rest of the world. And so you can travel faster than 1 second per second. So hypothetically, someone could visit us from the past. Also, in terms of general relativity, it is possible for time travel into the past to occur, at least theoretically. We don't have any rules that forbid this, and so consequently, it's also hypothetically possible that someone from the future could visit us. Do I think that's happened, though? Well, I'm aware of claims about these kind of things, but I need evidence to back up a claim. A claim by itself doesn't carry any specific reason to believe it, especially when it deals with something as exotic as time travel. And so I would need to see evidence that we've actually had a time traveler. And thus far, I haven't seen such evidence. I'm entirely open to the possibility, but I would need evidence to actually believe it. What about being visited by a creature from another dimension? Well, I know that at least some things you can call other dimensions exist, like heaven and hell, where the angels are and the souls of the departed. They're not here on earth. And so, you can conceptualize heaven and hell as alternative dimensions. Are there alternative, and we have been visited by creatures from them. A creature is a created being. And so angels are creatures, demons are creatures, departed spirits are creatures, and yeah, they visit us. But if you're thinking of an alternative physical dimension and a physical creature coming to visit us from that dimension, I don't know that there are alternative physical dimensions. There may well be. And there may well be creatures in them, and those physical creatures might very well visit us. But once again, I would need to see evidence for that actually happening. And thus far, I don't have persuasive evidence. Once again, I'm aware of claims, and I'm also aware of strange phenomena that have happened, but I'm not aware of strong proof that any of these strange phenomena or any of these claims correspond to actual physical visitations from another dimension. So once again, I'm open, but I don't have the evidence I would need to be convinced.
John, thank you for the question. As you heard, all lines full, so I'm going to keep moving, but I hope that was helpful to you. Trent's in Indiana. Trent, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So this is actually a follow-up to a question that I asked Trent Horn, and then a similar question that I asked Tim Staples. It's about music, and it's basically there are some artists that release some songs that are wholesome and good, and some that are not.
Yep.
And if I were to choose to listen to good, beautiful songs made by these artists, even without telling anyone about these artists, it would still encourage whatever algorithm of the platform I'm listening to them on, be it Spotify or Apple Music, etc., to promote that artist a little bit more. It would be a drop in the bucket, but it would still be, a passive way of promoting that artist's content. And of course, that would include their songs that are not God glorifying, and in some cases maybe even evil. So if I were to do that, would that cooperation with evil be great enough that you think it should be avoided, or some form of leading others astray, kind of like St. Paul talks about?
Okay, so you started by saying that you asked this question of Trent Horn and Tim Staples, and I have no idea what they told you. And so I can't, and wouldn't anyway, comment on what they may have said, because I stay in my own lane. But I can tell you what I think. and you can take it for what it's worth. I would suggest that in the future, if you ask additional people about this, that you don't mention having told other people about it or ask this question of other people, because it creates a potential awkward situation. And there's no need to make people feel awkward without a specific reason to, and you don't really have a specific reason here. So I'll tell you what I think, but because of that music, ironically, here's music coming up, I'll have to tell you on the other side of the break.
All right, just hang on if you would, and we'll get you an answer on the other side. If you're on the line, hang on the line. If you haven't called yet, you're always welcome to call 888-318-7884. More Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore. A little bit of groovy music for you there. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. On the line is Trent in Indiana, who asked a bit of a complicated question about if you listen to music online and you build up the listenership for someone, but what if that person has other material that's evil? Are you cooperating with evil? I think I summed it up, Jimmy.
In essence. So I don't really face this problem with music because I'm old school and I buy my music. If I like music, I buy it and then it's mine and I listen to it and I'm not dependent on some algorithm. So I don't face it with music, but I do face it with other things like videos. You know, I use YouTube like other people, and when you interact with YouTube videos, even if it's just by watching them, that affects the YouTube algorithm. And so I could face similar situations with watching a video from someone, and the video I'm watching is fine, or at least fine for me, but not all of that person's videos may be fine. And so it could promote their channel in some small degree, and that could affect what other people see, and who might, you know, fall into temptation as a result of some other video the person watches. Well, that would be bad, but this is fundamentally a situation of what's known as cooperation with evil. And there are principles for cooperation with evil that have been worked out by Catholic moral theologians and that are recognized by the Church. The principles that are involved in cooperation with evil is, number one, you don't have to run away from everything just because it's evil or there's some evil involved. In fact, you can't do that. We live in a fallen world, and there's no way to avoid all evil. So therefore, when can you cooperate with someone who's doing something evil? Well, that's going to be everybody that you cooperate with who is not Jesus or the Virgin Mary. Because everyone who's not Jesus or the Virgin Mary or otherwise a saint in heaven is a fallen sinner, and they're going to do something evil at some point, even if it's venial. So the key is, number one, you don't want to do something that's evil. So your own action needs to be fine. And if you're listening to a song or watching a video from someone that is itself fine, you're not doing anything evil. The second principle that's involved is the evil that the person is doing is not something that you are directly contributing to, in the sense that you are not, and I'm trying to avoid using technical terminology here, but you are not formally promoting the evil. You're not endorsing it. And the degree of cooperation that's present is remote. So, you're not doing the evil yourself. You're not approving of it. And thirdly, that there is a proportionate reason for doing the good thing here, that even though it's going to have a secondary effect that is evil. And so let's give an analogy just for sake of clarity in another field. Let's suppose you need to buy dinner, and it doesn't matter whether you buy the ingredients at the supermarket to make dinner, or whether you go out to a restaurant, or whether you order, a pizza or whatever. You're going to be paying some money to get what you need to eat dinner. And once you pay that money, you are not in control of what the other person does with it. They could go out and do bad things with that money. In fact, it's guaranteed, because people are sinners, that at some point you're going to pay for dinner in such a way that someone goes and does bad things with the money you paid. Well, okay, in this case, you're not approving what they did with the money, so you're not formally cooperating, and you're not yourself directly doing the evil thing. They are doing it with what's now their money, so the cooperation is remote, and it's only in terms of you've given them some material that they can use. So this is remote material cooperation, and for a proportionate reason, like I need to eat dinner, you can do this. So all we got to do is take the same principles and apply them to watching videos or watching or listening to songs. Well, okay, you're not approving of whatever other evil might come from this artist, so it's not formal cooperation. You yourself are not promoting their bad stuff, so it is remote cooperation. And all that's happening is some negative material might get out there in some small degree. So what that means is, if you have a proportionate good that, is equal or greater than the evil that's going to be done, then you can go ahead and participate in this activity. So if you get enjoyment as a result of listening to this person's good songs or watching this person's good videos, then that's going to overbalance any teeny tiny weeny little drop in the bucket of additional algorithmic promotion that's going to happen to the evil. And so I don't know what others have said, and frankly, I would rather not know that this question had been put to others. But in terms of what I think that in the vast majority of circumstances, doing this is going to be okay. If you get benefit from listening to this person's good material or watching this person's good material, the tiny, tiny effect that an algorithm is going to have in promoting their bad material is going to be so small that it's counterbalanced by the good that you derive, and therefore this would be permissible.
Trent, thank you very much for the call, for the question. Not only do I have full lines, but I got a full studio here. We've got students and parents from a local homeschool group, and we've got Abby here in studio to ask a question. Abby, lifelong homeschooler?
Mm-hmm.
You are?
Yes.
And what year are you now in school?
I'm a senior in high school.
You're a senior in high school. Oh, very good. Well, you're almost done.
Almost, yeah.
All right. So almost. Congratulations. You got a question for Mr. Aiken?
Yes, Mr. Aiken, I would like to wonder what your thoughts are on women veiling in the church during Mass.
Okay, well, I think it's a fine practice. If women want to wear a veil in church, I think that's great, and I support them doing that. On the other hand, the Catholic Church holds that this is not required. It is not required by ecclesiastical law, and it is not required, according to the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, by biblical law. It was required in St. Paul's time, but veils or head coverings had a different significance in their culture than they have now. And back in the 1970s, in the instruction Inter Inseniores that dealt with the role of women in the church, the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith held that the custom of wearing a head covering is not obligatory in our culture, because they just don't mean the same thing to us that they did back then. So I think it's a beautiful tradition, and if women want to do it, I heartily support them, but it's also not mandatory, and so if a woman doesn't want to wear a veil, I don't look down on them either. It's utterly up to the woman in question.
What do you think, Abby?
Thank you. I like that.
You like it? Okay, very good. Well, thank you for coming in and taking the tour. It's very nice to.
Thank you.
And we're going to have more questions from your group, I assume. All right. Thank you very much, Abby. Our next call comes from right here in California. Joseph here in California. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. So I currently live with my brother, and he is kind of like, I don't know talking about people. I just want to say the situation. He's kind of promiscuous, and I had overheard him kind of laughing about a situation with his friends in which he had used Plan B, and I know that I think I know that that's a possible a medication that can result in an abortion. So I was just wondering kind of what I should do about that. I've talked to him about pro-life stuff before. I've told him kind of like, how this is actually like killing someone. It's not actually just, just something that does something to a woman's body. But he's kind of just rejected that and said, no, I don't really believe you. And he doesn't want to talk about it. I've kind of said maybe press a little too hard, and he's just, no, I don't want to talk about it. So I'm based on the graveness of that kind of situation, where he's using this stuff and kind of sleeping around. I'm wondering what I should do or what I can do.
All right.
In this kind of situation.
Okay. Well, you've already tried the direct approach, and he shut that down. So he's made it clear he's not open to discussing it with you, at least at present. And so, he may change his mind in the future. You may be able to talk to him about it in the future, but you shouldn't. He's indicated that he's not open to that right now. And so the thing to do right now is bide your time and, see if in the future there are other better occasions. But in the meantime, you want to obviously pray for him and for all affected by his behavior. And you also want to do what you can to open him to respond in more positively to the truth in the future. And that means portraying the Christian faith as, a positive, wholesome thing that one should take seriously. So I would say live as a good Christian, be loving, be serious about your faith, go to Mass, go to confession, don't hide your faith. But on the other hand, don't press it on him either, because you mentioned you may have pressed too hard, and that may have been part of why he's reacting the way he is. So I would say live as a good Christian, give the best example you can, pray for him, and look for opportunities in the future where he might be more receptive, but don't press too hard.
Joseph, thank you. That brings us right to the break. So I will just say I hope that was helpful to you. I'd also like to give you a little booklet that Jimmy made called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. If you'd like a copy of that, just wait on the line. Edgar will get your address and we'll send it out to you. Right back with more questions for Jimmy Akin right after this.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
With news from EWTN's Vatican Bureau, you can watch all of the important events from Rome, even if you don't have TV access. Using the latest technology, we've made it possible to watch the latest news from the Holy See, all delivered directly to your home via live streams. Watch live on EWTN's YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin's our guest. Both hours today, it's Ask Me Anything. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. At shop.catholic.com, check out one of the biggest and best collections of Catholic books, online courses, ebooks, MP3s, and more that you will find on the internet. Black Friday and Cyber Monday are in the rearview mirror, but at shop.catholic.com, our great store-wide sale prices are not in the rearview mirror. They're right there in front of you. So go ahead. But before Christmas, you still got time. Visit shop.catholic.com. As I said, Jimmy Akin, our guest, I asked him about what dropped today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, but he's got multiple podcasts. And so I'll ask you, Jimmy, about the Jimmy Akin podcast. What's on a Jimmy Akin podcast this week?
This week, it was a look at the passage in St. Luke's Gospel where Jesus. That's coming up. This week, it was on Jesus clearing the temple, which is an event that occurs in all three of the Synoptic Gospels, and in John. So it's in all four Gospels, and there are some mysteries connected with it, like why did Jesus do that? Why did he clear the temple? And also, when did he do it? Because the three synoptics present Jesus doing it at the end of his ministry, but John presents him doing it at the beginning of his ministry. And so I talk about both of those events.
Type in Jimmy Akin podcast to your machine. You'll find it. It's part of Jimmy's YouTube page, and it's wherever you are looking for a podcast, wherever you get your podcast, you will find it. We'll tell you what, we'll come in studio for another question now for Jimmy. Another member of the Our Lady of Mount Carmel homeschooling group, Benedict. Welcome, Benedict.
Hey, guys.
You have a shirt on that says Chaldean Catholic. You're a Chaldean Catholic?
Yep.
You are. But sometimes you go to Mass at Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, you got a question for Mr. Akin?
So my question is, what's a good balance between set prayers like the Hail Mary compared to just talking to God throughout the day? Like, what's a good balance between those?
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, there is no single answer to this. It's going to depend on the individual and what their personal inclinations are and what commitments they've made, and what their immediate circumstances are, because people's circumstances change. And so there's not a single rule on this, which is why the church doesn't have any rules on this. It leaves it up to the individual to determine based on their own prudential judgment. Now, if someone is a member of a religious order that obliges them to, say, pray the Liturgy of the Hours every day, well, then they're going to be doing more set prayers during the day than a person who doesn't have that commitment. On the other hand, if they are an ordinary layperson and they don't have a commitment to pray the Liturgy of the Hours, they may do more spontaneous prayer and just talk to God. So I don't think that and looking at my own experience, it varies from day to day. So I tend to pray in a responsive manner. I may say Hail Marys or other set prayers. I may just talk to God. It's just kind of a mix. And frankly, I don't get scrupulous and worry about it. I just do whatever comes natural.
Okay, Benedict, makes sense to you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. I hope you enjoyed the tour.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
All right, off we go to Portland, Maine. Nick is in Portland, Maine. Nick, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for taking my question. I'm a Protestant currently discerning the Catholic faith. I'm doing a lot of research, as you can imagine. There's a lot to read up about. The question I have is about papal infallibility. This is obviously something that I think is quite controversial and something I'm trying to get my head around. And I guess the question I had is, what do you think we as Catholics should do if the Pope were to, say, declare ex cathedra something that was clearly heretical? And I'm not saying that this is something that would happen, but if you look back into the past, there have been a number of bad popes. Take someone like Benedict IX. What do you think Catholics should do if something like that were to happen one day?
Well, as a matter of faith, I believe that's never going to happen because the Holy Spirit protects the Pope from teaching anything erroneous when, at least on matters of faith and morals, when he's speaking ex cathedra. So, and anything heretical is something that's false on a matter of divinely revealed faith and morals. So the Holy Spirit will prevent the Pope from ever doing that. This question coming from a Catholic perspective is like saying, well, what if I was reading the Gospel of Matthew and I found something in the Gospel of Matthew that was flatly heretical? Well, the Holy Spirit's protected Matthew from doing that. And in the same way, the Holy Spirit protects the Pope from ever teaching anything heretical when he's making an ex cathedra statement. So it'll simply never happen. Now, if something like that looked like it happened, well, then we'd have to conclude that we need to resolve this difficulty, and that difficulty could be resolved in a number of ways. We could look at the difficulty, the statement that the Pope has made, allegedly ex cathedra, and say, well, something's wrong here because on its face, this appears to be heretical. So either it doesn't mean what we think it means, and it's not actually heretical. So that would be resolving the difficulty by looking more carefully at the content of the papal statement, or he didn't say it under protection of infallibility. He didn't say it as an ex cathedra statement, in which case that would be resolving the difficulty. And so we could examine the circumstances of the statement more carefully and see if it was really an ex cathedra or infallible statement. So that would be resolving the difficulty, not in terms of more carefully analyzing the content of the statement, but in terms of analyzing the context of the statement. Was it genuinely ex cathedra or not? And this would be similar to resolving difficulties in the Bible. There are various Bible difficulties. Sometimes one book of Scripture will say something that on its face sounds very different than what is said in another book of Scripture, and then it's up to the biblical scholar to compare the passages and figure out how these reconcile with each other. And the same thing would need to happen. And, also, are we reading it correctly? Is this really meant to be an authoritative statement? The same kind of questions come up in resolving biblical difficulties that would come up in resolving difficulties concerning papal statements. So it would be the same basic applications of principles, but the same commitment is there as a matter of faith that just like God protected the biblical authors from teaching error, he prevents the popes from teaching error when they're speaking ex cathedra. And it is a complex area. Now, nothing like this has happened in church history, and I don't foresee it happening in the future that a pope would ever try to infallibly define something that looks heretical. But understanding how church teaching works is something that requires a degree of expertise. And I actually wrote a whole book about this called Teaching with Authority. And since you're here in the United States, although barely, given that you're up in Maine, we're able to send you a copy of that book. So, Cy, why don't we have Nick hang on the line, and we'll send him a copy of Teaching with Authority so he can get a really thorough background in church teaching and how it works and how to recognize when something is or isn't infallible. And also, I have chapters on how to deal with difficulties that crop up.
Nick, do hang on. We'd love to send you that book. Edgar will get your information and we will send it out. Lines continue full. On we go. Joseph is right here in Southern California, listening on our website, Catholic.com. Welcome, Joseph. Go ahead with your question.
Hello. Thanks to you both. Two questions for you. One, why isn't Enoch on the Mount of Transfiguration with Elijah and Moses? Why are they there? And do we have any more info on Enoch besides just the quick OT mention? And then two, why do some masses no longer give the precious blood, but only the host in the Eucharist? Theologically and practically speaking, beyond just being the same substance, and so being unnecessary to have both.
Okay, so in regard to the first question about Enoch, the only thing so first question, why wasn't he on, because you just asked three questions, so I'm going to have to go through them pretty quickly. Why wasn't Enoch on the Mount of Transfiguration? Well, we don't know because God didn't tell us, but I can tell you what I would suspect, but this is just a matter of speculation. The two figures that do appear on the Mount of Transfiguration are Moses and Elijah. Moses represents the law, the law of Moses. Elijah is the greatest of the prophets, and so together they represent the law and the prophets. And this is a visual enactment of the fact that the law and the prophets, the two components of the Hebrew scriptures, point forward and testify to Jesus. So Enoch is simply not a figure like Moses or Elijah in representing a big, huge chunk of scripture. In fact, he's barely mentioned in the Old Testament. That leads to the second question, do we know more about him? And the answer is no, not really. We know the teeny little bit about him that's mentioned in scripture. He was a subject that people were very interested in, and so a whole secondary literature outside of the Bible got developed that's known as the Enochic literature. And this includes some books that are named First Enoch, Second Enoch, and Third Enoch. I have even done some Mysterious Worlds on First Enoch. If you're interested in those, they're episodes 323 and 324. So you can go to mysterious.fm/323 and mysterious.fm/324 and listen to them. But even though the Enochic literature is interesting and can be informative about what some Jews and Christians later believed, they should not be regarded as accurate in terms of telling us about a historical Enoch. They're just written way too late for that. Then your third question, why do some masses today not distribute the precious blood? Well, during the pandemic, that was one reason, but the more fundamental reason is in the West, it became customary for quite a number of centuries to distribute the Eucharist to the laity in the form of bread, because it would be awkward to have enough chalices for a big, huge congregation to drink from, and they were afraid people would spill them. So it was to decrease the risk of profanation by accidental spillage that it became customary to not usually distribute to the laity under the form of wine. Instead, the priest was always required to receive under the form of wine. But since you received the entire Christ under the form of bread alone, it was for a long time determined that they didn't want to risk accidental profanation through spillage, and so they would just give people what they needed in the form of the Eucharist under the appearances of bread. More recently, there have been more options opened up in the Latin Rite of the Church, and so in a lot of places they do distribute under the form of wine.
All right, Joseph, I hope all that was helpful to you. I'm sure that you can hear the music, which means we have to take a very quick break. All the lines continue full, so if you're on the line, just hang on the line. We'll get to you when we come back on the other side. If you're not, one or two might open up during the break, and you can call 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, author of a whole bunch of books, including the aforementioned Teaching with Authority, and also The Bible is the Catholic Book, and A Daily Defense. We'll continue with Jimmy taking all questions or any questions that come right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Finishing strong this week. We got Jimmy Akin this hour. Ask Me Anything. 888-318-7884. And Jimmy's here. I think people know this. I don't even say it anymore usually. You can really ask anything, whatever you'd like to know. You are welcome to call. Jimmy, of course, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Now the Jimmy Akin podcast also appears on a bunch of other podcasts, including this one. I think the total regular appearances is 6. Jimmy, is that right? Total regular. Yep. 6 different podcasts. But how many of them can people just pick up the phone and call you? How many of them are like that? Just this one? It's just this one?
Yeah, this is the only normal live call-in show,
Yeah, so your chance to call Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884. But as I said, all the lines are full, so we'll just put Jimmy right back to work. We'll go up to Alberta, Canada, where Catherine, enjoying the balmy winter weather of Canada, I am sure, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi.
Hi, Catherine.
My question is, of course, for Jimmy Akin. We had a discussion over email a few weeks ago about my situation with my family member, but I know you are insanely busy, so I will just get right to it. So as I mentioned in that email, a family member of mine who has been a devoted lifelong Catholic has now joined the Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen, which is essentially Sedevacantism. So he's now convinced that the church you and I attend every Sunday is the false church or the conciliar church, and he alone is a part of the true Catholic Church. His main and the heart of his reason for making this big decision is he believes that Saint Pope John Paul II was falsely canonized after he believes he encouraged and allowed pagan worship at Assisi. His specific allegations are that Jewish attendees were granted a request to worship in a room that had not been blessed in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And another example was that Buddhist idols were allowed and worshipped, and that even St. Pope John Paul II bowed before these idols. So his main issue is that there was no clarification on the evils of paganism, and that even the Assisi event was renewed after the fact. So I really want to bring him back to the church. How can I respond to his arguments?
Okay, well, the first one is I would want to see primary source documentation for each of the claims he's made. How do you know that these events ever happened? And how do you know, even if they did happen, that John Paul II authorized them as opposed to some Vatican apparatchik way down in the hierarchy? Because the Pope does not go over the plans for every little detail of what happens at an event. You know, he doesn't review it all personally and then give his approval or disapproval. Popes are way too busy for that. So they have lower down assistants who do that kind of stuff. So not only do you need to show that these events actually happened, you need to show that he himself approved them. And I'm very sure that he won't be able to provide primary source documentation as opposed to just claims, often claims made on some internet site, that these were the case. I'm just really sure that he will not be able to provide that. And given that, then we owe him the benefit of any doubt. You know, St. Paul says, reckon others better than yourselves. And if you read in the Catechism, it talks about how in cases of doubt, you have to give the benefit of the doubt as a form of proper respect to another human being. And that's all the more the case when it's the Pope, who deserves extra respect. I'm also very sure the Pope did not worship Buddhist statues. If he did, where's the photos? You know, show us the photos of that happening. And merely bending at your waist, you know, when there happen to be Buddhist statues in the room, does not mean you were worshiping them. He might be bowing to, for example, a person that is standing near them, because bowing is a customary form of greeting in many East Asian cultures. So you've got to look at any evidence that gets presented and consider carefully what could be going on in these situations. Then there's a third thing that would need to, if his claim is really that it was the canonization of John Paul II that that caused the church to fall into error and cease to be the true church, then you'd have to look at that canonization and say, what are the implications of it? Is that even meant to be infallible? Because if it's not meant to be infallible, and there are various theologians like Cardinal Avery Dulles, for one, and myself for another, who would argue that saint canonizations are not infallible, then canonizing him is not going to is not protected by infallibility, and therefore it would not falsify the church. It'd just be a mistake, even if all that were true. Then there's the fact that even if these events happened, and even if John Paul II approved them, well, that would mean that he made mistakes. But you know what is great about being Christian? Cy Kellett, if you're a Christian and you make mistakes, what can happen?
I could get forgiven by somebody.
Yeah,
that might happen.
Who would want to do the forgiving here?
Well, I mean, I suppose the person I offended,
Ultimately.
but God will always. God's always ready to forgive. Yeah.
So if you were a Christian, even a pope, and you make mistakes and you repent, God's going to forgive you. And certainly we saw that happen with the very first pope, with St. Peter, who actually denied Christ, which is worse than anything that your brother is alleging John Paul II did, actually denying Christ. And in Mark, it even says Peter began to curse. And there are significant reasons that some biblical scholars think he may have been cursing Jesus to demonstrate that he wasn't a follower of Jesus. And that's way worse than anything John Paul II is alleged to have done. And yet Peter got forgiven and went on to be a valid pope. So your brother is applying standards that A, have not, he hasn't properly vetted these claims, and B, he's applying standards that are not reasonable, that don't take into account other biblical principles, like giving people the benefit of the doubt, or people who've made mistakes being forgiven, or so forth. So basically all the stuff I just covered. There's a lot more to know about church teaching and how it works. And since you're in North America, although barely since you're in Canada, we should be able to send you a copy of Teaching with Authority. So if you'll hang on the line, we'll get you a copy of that, and you can read up to learn more about how to deal with challenges like this and how the church's teaching authority actually works.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to keep going and let Jimmy answer more questions because all the lines are full. Off to Baltimore, Maryland we go. Tom, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Tom. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes. Hello. I was wondering why in some Catholic Bibles the Maccabees chapters are at the very end of the Old Testament, while in others they're in the middle. As far as I know, the Maccabean revolt in Antiochus were 2nd century before Christ. It makes sense to have it at the end, but what's the discrepancies there?
Well, there is no divinely inspired table of contents. And so you find the books of the Bible in different orders in different Bibles. And that applies not just to, now these days, we have a pretty much universal placement of the New Testament books, but that hadn't always been the case. Today, the Gospels are typically presented in the order Matthew, Mark, Luke. But if you go back and read Christian Bibles from earlier in history, you'll find them in different orders, like you'll have Matthew, John, Mark, Luke, or things like that. And we still have that to some degree with the Old Testament. Some Old Testaments put the Maccabees at the end, so that because they're dealing with a historical period that is closest to the New Testament. On the other hand, some want to keep all of the historical books together, and so they place them earlier after Ezra and Nehemiah, because they are, like Ezra and Nehemiah, they're historical books, and so they keep them with the other historical books, and then they go off into the wisdom literature and then into the prophetic books. So it's really up to the Bible publishers to decide how do they want to structure things.
All right.
Okay. All right.
No problem.
Tom, you know what? Since you asked a Bible question, I haven't given away Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book, for a while. So why don't you hang on the line and we'll send you, we're happy to send to Baltimore a copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book. That'll take me to the break, actually. We better take a break. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Catechism in a Year with me, Father Mike Schmitz, is now available right here on Catholic Radio. Encounter God's plan of sheer goodness for us, revealed in Scripture and passed down through the tradition of the Catholic faith, as we journey together toward our heavenly home.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Having fun on a Friday here. It feels festive because Edgar put up the decorations. We've got the stockings up. We've got that beads of some sort up. Not exactly. 2 Christmas trees of the Charlie Brown variety. And we've got guests in studio with us. Jimmy Akin is our guest both hours today, and it's an Ask Me Anything. And in studio, we have students from the Our Lady of Mount Carmel homeschooling group, and now we have Emmanuel in studio with us. Hello, Emmanuel.
Hi.
And what year are you in school, Emmanuel?
I'm in freshman, and I'm in 9th grade.
All right, you are in 9th grade. Well, we're happy to have you here. You have a question for Mr. Akin?
Yeah.
All right, right up to the microphone there and go ahead and ask your question.
It says in Genesis that God's presence dwelled in the Garden of Eden, and since marriage or sex is the manifestation of our desire to be in union with God, then why did Adam yearn for a partner, Eve?
Because God designed him to have one. And so he wanted a human race, and that means that, and he designed us as sexual beings, so it takes both a man and a woman to have a baby, and he wanted them to have babies, and so he built the desire for a partner into Adam. And because human babies are born, because of how smart we are, we need to be born with really big heads. Then because we're bipeds, we walk upright. The babies need to be born when they're immature enough that their giant heads can still fit through the birth canal. And that means they have to be born very prematurely compared to other species. And that means that the parents need to stay together for decades to raise them to adulthood. So that's why we have permanent marriages as humans. And so that means we're here to help each other out, because you need to, if you want the parents to stay together, they need to both contribute something, and they need to contribute more than sex. So they both need to make contributions, and that leads to marriage being, in the church's terms, a partnership of the whole of life that is oriented towards the procreation and education of offspring. And so God built Adam to be married, to have a partner. Now, you may also have, some people who've looked at the desire for sexual union and said, oh, that reflects a desire for union with God. And okay, that I can see there's an element of truth there, but I wouldn't say that statement exhausts the reason for desire for sexual union. We also desire sexual union because God built us to. And so to have that. And so God built Adam this way, and Adam was living in accordance with Adam's nature to desire a partner in addition to God.
Okay, Emmanuel, makes sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
It was a very advanced question. I'm very impressed. Thank you for coming in. All right, on we go. Chris is in Miami, Florida, listening on the app, the Catholic Answers Live app. Glad to have you here with us, Chris. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Sai. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Chris.
Hope you guys are doing well.
Thank you.
So my question is this. It's on the validity of different Bible translations. I was discussing abortion with someone online, perhaps my first mistake, and they mentioned the Bible condones abortion, referencing Numbers 5 verses 21. Now, Jimmy, using points that you made in a video from September 2020, I explained that this wasn't the case, and I went through all the points that you made. The person then quoted word for word the verse they were referencing, and indeed, it did use the wording, "May the Lord cause you to become a curse among your people when he makes your womb miscarry." I noticed this wasn't written in the Bible that I use. I use a Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, but it is in the New International Version, the NIV. So what is the validity of this version, the NIV, and are there certain versions we shouldn't use as Catholics?
Okay, so first of all, we probably better clarify what we're talking about here. The passage you're referring to is in Numbers chapter 5, where it provides a test known as the rite of bitter water that brings a curse. For if a man begins to suspect that his wife has been unfaithful to him, there's this ritual they're supposed to do. And in the from what you're saying, in the NIV, the curse involves her womb miscarrying. But that's not what you're seeing in your, did you say Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition?
That's right.
Okay, so here's the thing. It does not clearly refer to miscarriage in the original Hebrew. When you have a question about, a passage where we're not sure what it means, it's going to come out different in different Bibles, and some of them are going to make reasonable guesses and some of them are going to make less reasonable guesses. So the translators of the New International Version, based on what you're saying, guessed that this passage means have a womb that miscarries. But that is not what it actually says in Hebrew. A literal translation of what it says is, your thigh will fall. And it's not really clear what that means. And so if you read biblical commentators, they will point out that there have been a bunch of suggestions of what this might mean. It might mean that, like, for example, the ancient Jewish historian Josephus, who lived in the 1st century, he interpreted this because it says your belly will swell and your thigh will fall. He suggested it was dropsy, or what we today would call edema, or pathological swelling, but not miscarriage. More recent suggestions do include miscarriage, but they also include other medical conditions like thrombophlebitis and false pregnancy. So it's not really clear exactly what's going on in this passage. And the NIV interpreters have rendered it one way, and other translations render it other ways. So this is just an ambiguous text. It's just hard to be sure exactly what it means. So that then gets to your overall question, without all that as background, that gets to your overall question of, are there any translations we just shouldn't use? Well, in terms of for a specific purpose, if you know a translation has a problematic rendering of a particular passage, well, you don't want to use it in arguments that concern that passage. But the overwhelming majority of Bibles that are professionally translated these days are in the main quite fine. I'm not going to say never use the NIV because it has a questionable translation in Numbers 5. It's not like other translations don't have their own questionable versions of certain verses. Every translation has to deal with ambiguous passages, and they're all translated by humans, and humans make mistakes and have bad choices. And so every translation has some bad passages in it. So in terms of, are there translations I would say you really shouldn't use apart from really special circumstances? Well, the Jehovah's Witness New World Translation comes to mind, because that one was done incompetently and with an agenda that's very strong and that contradicts what's actually in the Greek in various places. But the majority of translations are competently done. They may contain mistakes, but I wouldn't say never use them on the basis of an occasional mistake. I just say, well, be aware that any translation you're using may have some bad passages, and you need to be aware of that. And if you run across a passage that says something that seems odd, well, then you can check it out and find out, okay, is this one of those passages in this Bible? But I wouldn't say never use it. So that's what I'd have to say in general terms.
Chris, thank you. That was a Bible question, so if you'd like a copy of Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book, we'll send that to you. Just hang on the line, and Edgar will get your information. Still lines full, so off we go now to Texas. Joseph in Texas has been waiting for a while. Joseph, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
No problem, and thank you very much for taking my call. I have a moral question. From a Catholic perspective, does what we might call successful bankruptcy filing merely forgive debt in a legal sense and not a moral sense? And then kind of the finesse on the question is, does it change your answer at all if it's, like a large corporation that the debt is concerning, or if it's as personal as your parent?
Okay, so generally, the civil law is presumed to reflect the moral law unless there is a specific reason to the contrary. So that's like why if civil law says you can't buy this particular thing, it's illegal to buy this, well, then you generally shouldn't unless there is a specific reason to the contrary in a particular case. So generally, the civil law and the moral law are presumed to track, except when you can show that's not the case. Now, the reason that we have bankruptcy laws is to help people out when they get into financial difficulties, because, human beings sometimes get into financial difficulties, and it promotes the common good to have ways out of those difficulties. They had the equivalent of forgiveness of debts in ancient Israel. So, for example, every 7 years, debts were forgiven. So if you had an outstanding debt in ancient Israel, and the 7th year came around, that debt would get forgiven, and you didn't have to pay the person back. And so, you were released from that obligation. Now, let's suppose the person that had loaned you the money, even though the 7th year has happened and they can't collect the money from you, let's suppose they really need it. And let's suppose that you then come in to some money and you could pay them reasonably. Well, I would say in that case, you ought to pay them, not because you're legally required to, but just because they need the money and now you have the money. And it's a good and loving thing in order to repay them in that situation, even though you're not legally obligated to. And I would say the same thing applies in bankruptcy cases. Now, you mentioned, what if it's a large corporation that you owe money to? Well, you're probably not they won't even have a mechanism to be able to process that. Let's say you own a house and you have a bankruptcy, and then you say, oh, and now and then you come into a windfall of money, and you want to say to this giant corporation, I want to pay you that money that I used to owe but now don't. They're not going to know how to handle that. Their accounting department is not set up to even process things like that. And so you may as well not bother in that case. On the other hand, you mentioned parents. So, well, I'd say that the same principles I articulated with regard to ancient Israel would apply here. Even though you're not legally obliged to pay your parents back, if they need the money and you come into the money, then I would say it's a good thing to pay them that money, even though you're no longer legally obligated to, just because you're their son and you love them and it's a good thing to do. So if they then say, oh, no, don't bother, well, then they've released you from that. But I would say it's generally a good thing to do if they need it, and if you have it and can afford it, then even if you don't legally owe it to them, it's still a good thing to do.
Joseph?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying the principle it falls on at this point is Christian charity and maybe the nature of kind of intimate relationships. I feel like if you have an intimate relationship with someone, by nature of that intimacy, you owe them something. And it sounds like that's the kind of line of reasoning you're going with.
Well, it's not just intimate relations, although that adds to it. Well, I mean, we should be loving to everybody, and so even if someone was not my parent, but if they need the money and I can give them the money reasonably, then it's a loving thing to do that, even if they're not my parent. But being my parent, that adds to it.
Joseph, thank you. You can hear the music. We have to take the break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. Suddenly there are a couple lines open. 3 lines open, as a matter of fact. 888-318-7884. What was the church like in its infancy? In a word, Catholic. And Joe Heschmeyer has the receipts. In his best-selling book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, he gives you the details from the historical records of the first 2 centuries of Christianity. Right now, get a copy for just $10, plus free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Get more information and order The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at theearlychurchwascatholic.com.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. Digging that groovy music. There's a little bit of groovy music for you. It follows Jimmy around. He used to be on Thursdays when Jimmy was on Thursdays. Now Jimmy's here with us on Fridays and actually requested that it come, and I'm glad. That kind of those two things go together, Jimmy Akin and the groovy music. Also, lots and lots of questions goes with Jimmy Akin. A great variety of questions this hour, and there's probably a chance if you would like to get in on that variety, if you call now, I'm looking at the lines, we could probably get you in before the top of the hour, 888-318-7884. Going to head back up to Canada now. Deborah is in Ontario, Canada, watching on YouTube. Glad you're here, Deborah. Go ahead with your question.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, with the Orthodox Jewish people, why did they not believe that Jesus is the Messiah? And how do we know that, I guess the only way I can say it is that they are making an incorrect judgment and we as Christians make the correct judgment?
Okay, Deborah, I had a little trouble hearing that. I'm not sure if you're speaking directly into the phone or if you got us on speaker. But I think I got the essence of your question, but I need to ask you a follow-up. You said Orthodox Jews, but then you used the past tense. You said didn't. And so Orthodox Judaism is a movement within Judaism. It's a specific form of modern Judaism of a type which is known as Rabbinic Judaism. It did not exist in the first century. Instead, it arose later, and it's only one of several groups. In addition to Orthodox Judaism, there's conservative Judaism, there's Reform Judaism, and there are a few others as well. So is your question about Jewish people in general, or is it about Orthodox Jews specifically, or is it about Jews in the time of Christ? Could you give me a little extra clarity on that?
Okay. I would say Jewish people in general.
Okay. So anytime someone asks me a question of why don't group X believe thing Y, the fundamental answer is, well, you should ask them, because they're the best qualified ones to explain their reasons. I can give you some perspective, and I try to keep it as evidential as I can, because it's very easy for outsiders in particular to fall into psychological explanations for other people's beliefs rather than evidential reasons for other people's beliefs. That's not to say that there aren't psychological reasons, but I believe generally, if you ask someone, why do you think this, they're not that likely to give you a psychological answer. They're more likely to try to come up with an evidential answer. And so now there can be a variety of different claims there can be a variety of different responses to the question you've asked. But if you ask many Jewish people, especially Jewish leaders, why do you not think Jesus is the Messiah? Probably the number one answer you're going to get is he hasn't fulfilled messianic prophecy. Because the way the Messiah is understood in Judaism, he's supposed to be this ideal king of Israel who introduces a reign of peace among the nations, and they're not expecting him to die on a cross and things like that. So they would say they just don't think he fulfilled messianic prophecies the way they understand it. The Christian response to that is, well, actually, there are some passages that talk about a suffering Messiah, most notably in Isaiah 53 in the Old Testament. And then that gets us into a discussion of, does Isaiah 53 point to the Messiah? And there's actually some Jewish traditions that say, yes, it does, but not all Jewish traditions. So Jesus, according to Christians, did fulfill many of the messianic prophecies, but he hadn't fulfilled them all yet, because he fulfilled a certain number of them that dealt particularly with the suffering Messiah. And then when he comes back at the end of time, that's when he introduces the golden age in this era of peace, where he reigns personally over Israel and on earth among mankind and so forth. That happens at the second coming. So he, from a Christian perspective, has fulfilled some messianic prophecies, but not yet all of the messianic prophecies. So that's a general sketch of kind of the main elements in the discussion here. In terms of why would a Christian conclude that he is the Messiah? Well, he has fulfilled a bunch of messianic prophecies. Also, he rose from the dead, and we have really good evidence that he rose from the dead. The competing hypotheses just do not hold up well. And I would recommend something, I'm not sure currently what they charge for it. I don't think it's too much, but I actually did a whole video course at the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics called Evidence for Christ, where I go through all of these subjects. I talk about messianic prophecy. I talk about what Jesus has and has not fulfilled in terms of messianic prophecy. And I talk about Jesus rising from the dead and the evidence we have for that. So comprehensively, that course is really on point for the subject you're asking about, and I would recommend that you get a copy of that. In fact, it may even be possible for us to give you a copy of that course. I'm not sure.
I think we can. I don't want to make a promise, Deborah, but if you hang on the line, we'll get your information. And if it's possible, I think we can give out the courses. We'll get it to you. So just hang on, Deborah. We'll get your information. And if we can get you Evidence for Christ, Jimmy Akin's School of Apologetics course, we'll get it out one way or another. Jonathan is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube. Jonathan, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
In my psych class at university, we were given a scenario where early identification of potentially violent children sort of exists. So this would be, in this example, like psychopaths. And we were told that 60% of these children would exhibit this extreme violent behavior in society.
Okay.
If they were left unchecked.
Jonathan, I'm having trouble understanding you. Can you speak more slowly and directly into the phone?
Yes. Can you hear me now better?
Yes.
Okay. So we were given a scenario where we were told you could identify potentially violent children, like psychopaths, and if we left these children unchecked, 60% of them would exhibit this violent behavior in society, and 40% would not. We were told, sort of asked, like, to either choose to like hospitalize these children, these potentially violent children, as a means to sort of protect like what could potentially happen, or let them be in society and, you know, let that run its course. So I was sort of wondering what could be the Catholic perspective on how to approach this question, and sort of articulate a response, in that regard, if that makes sense.
So did they propose an answer to this question?
Not specifically. We were just they were asking like what we individually thought would be the quote unquote appropriate response to this.
Okay. And is this a homework? I mean, is this a test question or just a class assignment?
Something we were like a discussion question, and I was sort of
That's
thrown off the loop in class, not sure how to answer.
Okay. So, well, it doesn't. Okay. So let's strip away the irrelevant factors first. The fact that these are children is irrelevant. What we have here is a claim that we can detect a certain population that has violent tendencies. And according to the claim, 60% of the members of the population are going to do something violent in society if we don't lock them up, and give them some kind of treatment, I guess. That I believe that was part of the scenario you mentioned, because and then on the other hand, 40% of them won't do anything and will be safe in society. Well, in approaching this, I would say if you have there are a whole bunch of variables here, and I think this is why this is a discussion question, because there's no clear answer. On the one hand, you need to ask, well, how reliable is this psychopathy test? You know, is it really reliable or not? I mean, today in psychology, we have the PCLR checklist that is kind of useful for detecting, you know, psychopathic traits if it's administered correctly, but not everybody who has psychopathic traits is going to max out that scale. And even among those who do have psychopathic traits, that doesn't mean they're going to be violent. There are lots of successful psychopaths who are not violent. Now, it seems like they've stipulated for purposes of this thought exercise that 60% are violent, but 60% is really close to 50%. And so I don't think that lets us have if we can't detect which are members of the 60% and which are members that are going to be violent and which are members of the 40% that are not going to be violent, if the options are lock them all up or let them all go, I would say this is a deliberately ambiguous situation that there's no clear answer on, because we need to know other factors like, well, how violent are they actually going to be? If they're just going to go out and be jerks and maybe get in a bar fight and punch someone, that's different than becoming mass murderers. Also, if we lock them up, do we have an effective treatment? Or do we not have an effective treatment? And what are the costs of locking them up and keeping them contained? And what are the costs and harms potentially that can come from this treatment and from their dislocations from their families and things like that? You can't just rip children away from their families because you think it's a good idea and not expect there to be costs. So I would say from a Catholic point of view, we need much more data than is presented in this question. We need to have much more knowledge about, you know, exactly how reliable is this test, how reliable are these statistics, what are the costs and benefits of taking these children away from their parents and putting them in an institution? Can we actually effectively treat them there? Are there going to be unintended negative consequences to the children and other members of society? We just need way more information than we've got. And so I would say we have a fundamentally ambiguous situation on which people could reasonably take different opinions.
And I hope that was helpful to you, Jonathan, but we are at the time for the break, so I will leave it there and come back with more questions for Jimmy. It's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. Before I go to the break, I'll tell you what, we might have room for one or two more calls, so give it a shot. 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I told him about the woman who came to me and said her two children hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Their grandma died, and she was very wealthy. She left half to each one. She said they're arguing over a commode. She said it's inlaid. Can you imagine being in hell and somebody saying to you, "What are you here for?"
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Jimmy Akin, our guest, and it's Ask Me Anything. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, Catholic Answers Live. Hey, Jubilee year starts. I've been trying to mention it every day. Jubilee year starts on Christmas Eve. If you want to know about it, there are lots of websites dedicated to it. You can check out the Vatican website. They've got information on it. Big Jubilee year, every 25 years in the Catholic Church, and every now and then a bonus one in between. But the every 25-year one, we're pretty we stick to those. So if you want to find out about it, do find out about it. The internet is full of information on it. Next call for Jimmy is coming from Oklahoma. Mary is in Oklahoma. Mary, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, yes. I'm also apologize in advance. I ask questions horribly, but is there anything in the Bible or anywhere in the Bible that mentions like mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and kind of like what kind of relationships like us as married people are supposed to have with our in-laws?
How long you been married, Mary?
Only a small 4 years.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's get you an answer. Sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah, and I don't know why you say you ask questions horribly, because that was perfectly intelligible.
Yeah.
So there are mentions of in-laws, but there aren't really rules that are applied. Now, in ancient Israel, their society was a little different than ours because it was organized along patriarchal lines. And so if you're a male, you're always a member of your father's house. And if you're a female, when you marry someone, you become a member of your husband's house. So your primary allegiance goes to them. So even though you have love and relations with your biological parents in your own house of origin, your primary responsibility is now to the house of your husband, which is the house of his fathers, his line in the tribe. But that's their culture. That's not our culture. And it doesn't, in our culture, it's much more egalitarian. Now, women do commonly take the name of their husband, but they don't view themselves as, now my primary allegiance is with my husband's family rather than my family of origin. That was a cultural matter that doesn't really apply in our circumstance. Even in the ancient world, though, it was acknowledged a woman still has a relationship with her family of origin, but she's also supposed to, be a loving and loyal stepdaughter to the family, or daughter-in-law to the family that she's married into. And the same general principles are going to apply here. You want to get along with both your family of origin and your in-laws to the extent possible. Now, because we're not a patriarchal culture, you're not really under the authority of the older generation, the way people were in extended families, where you kind of need to listen to the family patriarch and obey his orders under ordinary circumstances. Today, you don't really got to listen to your grandfather, whether you're a male or, if you're a male, you don't really your grandfather doesn't really give you orders. And in the same way, if you're married to a husband, you don't really got to listen to your husband's grandfather give you orders, because we're not living in extended families that are multi-generational like this. So I would say just the principles that do apply from their culture to ours are, in general, love your neighbor. You want to love your in-laws to the best of your ability. Since they're family, since they're close, you want to do what you can for them. You want to help folks get along, but that doesn't mean you gotta, slavishly cater to their every whim.
I think I'll come back to you. Make sure that we got to what you wanted, Mary. Is that all clear?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome. Thank you for the call. I'm going to come back here to California. Aiden is here in California. Aiden, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, Jimmy. For Our Lady of Fatima's peace plan, does she want us to be enrolled in a scapular by a priest? I'm confused with what exactly a part of the peace plan.
Well, to tell you the truth, I am too, because I hear a lot of people making claims about Mary's peace plan and stuff like that. And I would have to do research into the primary source documents, and I actually have the primary source documents. I suspect that a lot of what gets claimed may not be that reliable, because people have a tendency to exaggerate and build in things that are really more their own personal preferences. And also, even though Fatima is an approved apparition, that doesn't mean everything in it is exactly the will of heaven. Also, the primary period that Fatima applied to was the Cold War. And when the Soviet, and John Paul II acknowledged that after the Soviet Union fell apart, the principal era that Fatima applied to was in the past. So to the extent there was a Fatima peace plan, it applied to peace in the Cold War. And that's over. Now, there can always be a new Cold War. We can always also take principles from things Mary apparently counseled at Fatima and apply them today, but we're applying them to a fundamentally new situation. And so we're kind of doing that. If we do that, we're doing that in hope that it'll have a positive effect today, and it may well, but we don't have a promise. And so I would say that we shouldn't get overly scrupulous in this area, because there are a bunch of uncertainties, and we just want to try to be good people and pray to God for peace and do what we can to promote peace in the world. But we shouldn't look at certain things like wearing a scapular as if it's magic and if I wear a scapular, it's going to cause peace in the world. Well, that's unlikely. I mean, maybe it will, but it's kind of unlikely. So I would say don't be overly scrupulous in this area.
Aiden, thank you. I hope that answer was helpful to you. Going to keep going, try to get as many as I can on. Alan is in Tucson, Arizona. Welcome, Alan. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, hi. Not that long ago, we were at a rosary group at church, and the leader indicated that the devil could steal souls from purgatory. Is that true?
Not in the Catholic understanding of purgatory. In the Catholic understanding of purgatory, everyone who goes to purgatory goes to heaven. Purgatory is simply a sort of antechamber to heaven, where they clean you up so that you're ready to be in heaven. And once you die in God's friendship, your salvation is secure. And if you're in the process of getting cleaned up, the devil has no ability to make your salvation unsecure. So whoever this person was that said this, if that's what they said, they were not articulating the Catholic Church's understanding, but their own idea.
That's what I thought too. I thought, that's my impression of what I've read so far. But I thought, just call someone and get an answer. So
I'm glad you did, Alan. Thank you. Alan, tell you what, we have a book on purgatory. Purgatory is for real by our colleague, Carlo Broussard. And if you'd like a copy of it, I will be happy to send it out to you. Just hang on, and we'll get an address to send it to. Thanks, Alan. Davis is in New England. Welcome, Davis. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah. So the rumor is that the next Archbishop of Canterbury is going to be a woman bishop. If the next Archbishop of Canterbury, the Church of England, is a woman, would that mean that the Church of England has apostatized and that the Catholic Church should end ecumenical dialogue with the Church of England?
Well, no, it would not mean that the Anglican Church has apostatized, because apostasy is the complete repudiation of the Christian faith. It's way worse than heresy. It's way worse than any other form of religious error. It's where you say, I am no longer a Christian. If you maintain any kind of Christian identity, you have not apostatized. And so if they do have a female Archbishop of Canterbury, well, that's a mistake, but it's not the only mistake the Anglican Church has made, and it is not equal to apostasy.
Tell you what, I'm going to try to get another one on, so I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for the question. Let's go to Ted in Denver, Colorado. I'll tell you what, Ted, if you could please ask your question quickly, that will give Jimmy a chance to answer it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Why do us Catholics honor the Sabbath day on Sunday?
Well, that was quick. Thank you, Ted.
Well, we don't. We honor the principle of having a day for rest and worship on Sunday rather than on Saturday, which is the Sabbath. But so we honor the principle, but the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath, it's always been Saturday, and Sunday is not the Sabbath, even though you hear some people use that language. What Sunday is the Lord's Day. So the reason we honor the Lord's Day and not Saturday is because we're not bound by the law of Moses, which commands Saturday as a day of rest and worship. So we're just not bound by that. But Jesus rose from the dead. The Lord Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday, and so we celebrate the Lord's Day instead. And that's a tradition that goes all the way back to the first century, and we see the apostles like St. Paul doing that. You know, he talks about how collections for the poor should be taken up on the first day of the week, on Sunday, when Christians are meeting together collectively. And so we know that Christian worship on Sunday goes all the way back to the first century, and the reason is because that's the day on which our Lord Jesus rose from the dead.
Ted, that all makes sense to you?
Yes, it does. I just need to know the exact spelling of your last name, Jimmy.
It's really easy. It's just like it sounds. My last name is Akin, and so it's spelled A-K-I-N. There are no E's, T's, or S's. It's just 4 letters, Akin, A-K-I-N.
Ted, thank you. You often I ask people at the end of the show, will you please get to your question quickly? And
you did.
They don't. They don't, but you did, Ted. What book can we give Ted to say thank you for being quick when we asked him to be quick?
Daily Defense.
Let's give him yes. Those are 1-page answers. A Daily Defense, 365 days plus 1 to becoming a better apologist. Jimmy Akin's book. Perfect for a guy who can get right to his question, because Jimmy can get right to his answer in those books. Jimmy, thanks very much. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, new episode drops each Friday. And today's episode, it was just there.
Exorcism.
Oh, yeah, exorcisms. Look, everybody's talking about exorcisms. You know you want to know what Jimmy Akin has to say about all this. Check it out. He looks at the rites of exorcisms to uncover the truth about exorcism, because there's all kinds of stuff out there right now. Also, check out the Jimmy Akin podcast and a lot of other things from Jimmy on his YouTube page or wherever you get your podcasts. Jimmy, thank you very much. I always enjoy doing 2 hours with you.
Likewise.
And that will do it for us here at Catholic Answers. What a great week. Enjoy. Oh, well, we're getting closer and closer. Don't forget, the Jubilee year starts Christmas Eve. And then Christmas season starts also Christmas Eve. We'll be back Monday to do it again. Thanks. We'll see you then, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.